I'm Jenna Miscavige. I was born and raised in Scientology. I left when I was 21 years old and wrote a book about it. My uncle, David Miscavige, is the leader of Scientology, and this is my YouTube channel. Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about the next worst thing about Scientology. And so the question was initially from Stacy, the SPTV addict. And she says, if you could make a bullet point list, especially for us never-ends, to share with other never-ends on social media about the 10-15 worst things about the Church of Scientology, to maybe draw someone in, to look into it more, question it more, and even be compelled to also share, what would those bullet points be? So, number 2 on the list of the worst things about Scientology, for me personally, is disconnection. Disconnection is a Scientology practice where if somebody speaks publicly badly about Scientology or gets declared a suppressive person, then Scientologists are required to no longer speak to them, to cut off all contact. You can't follow them on social media. You can't see that person in real life. You can't call them on the phone, you can't email with them, nothing. They just have to be cut off. In Scientology, someone is declared a suppressive person if they speak publicly about Scientology, if they say anything bad about it. But there's also many smaller reasons why Scientologists can be declared a suppressive person. I was a Scientologist, I grew up in Scientology, so some of the reasons why I was declared a suppressive person were informing fellow staff members and others that one is leaving staff. This is the list of all the reasons why I got declared a suppressive person. So if I did something as small as tell my friend, okay, I want to leave staff now, I could be declared a suppressive person. Another example of why somebody could be declared a suppressive person is reporting or threatening to report Scientology or Scientologists to civil authorities in an effort to suppress Scientology or Scientologists from practicing or receiving standard Scientology. So for instance, in this case, Scientology was trying to take away my cell phone and I didn't want them to. And they did this repeatedly over a period of months. And I said, oh, I'm gonna call the cops if you take away my phone. And that for them is a good enough reason to be declared a suppressive person. Another thing that people get declared a suppressive person for in Scientology is something as simple as being in contact with a suppressive person. So you could just be friends with somebody who is declared an SP and you now are going to be cut off by all Scientologists and and have no contact with them at all. Now, if you think about it, many Scientologists, especially kids who grew up there, Scientologists are the only people who they have in their life. It's the only people who they went to school with. It's the people who they work with. It's their entire family. And so it's not just letting go of a few friends. It's actually, like in my case, it was letting go of literally everybody who I had ever known my entire life. And they just cut you off one day. They no longer speak to you. And these connections are monitored very closely by a dedicated department in Scientology called the Office of Special Affairs. They follow who follows who on Instagram, who follows who on Facebook. Scientologists regularly come into the church and they do confessionals, or they'll report on each other, they'll report themselves. So even if Scientology's Office of Special Affairs has no way of finding out, Scientologists will often report themselves because they think that they are endangering their chance at spiritual freedom if they don't. So simply all ties are severed. I mean, I left Scientology in 2005 and I should say, about 20 members of my family have not spoken to me since that happened. And it gets a little bit more complicated because it's not just like, oh, the family members are too chicken to speak to me and they could just be nice and speak to me on the down low. Actually, that's not how it works, because just say, let's take one of my aunts, for example. She has children who work for Scientology. So by speaking to me, she would have to be choosing not to speak to her children. And nobody's going to choose to speak to their niece over their children. Or she would also have to choose not to speak to her friends, or to put herself in a position where her friends and family wouldn't be speaking to her either. So it's not just a choice that people make in Scientology about not wanting to speak to that one person because they think they're horrible. It's that they know that Scientology will force them to disconnect from everyone else if they stay in contact with you. In many, if not most cases, this goes far beyond just disconnecting people from friends and family. It also affects people's livelihood, because Scientologists often work with other Scientologists, especially if you grew up in Scientology. Scientologists are the only connections you have. And so you often work at a Scientology company or a company owned by other Scientologists. And so basically, if you say anything negative about Scientology, or if you associate with people who have done that on the internet, or something just as mild as putting up a blog post, then you can and most likely will lose your job. And Scientology doesn't care that the person you're remaining in contact with is your mother or your kid. They expect you to disconnect completely regardless. So just as an example, my ex-husband, when he and I left Scientology together, his mother worked at a Scientology company, and she worked there for many years. And Scientology was pressuring her constantly to disconnect from us, from me and my ex-husband. And she did not, and she wound up getting fired from the company that she worked for, which was owned and run by Scientologists. So I just want to give you some examples of how Scientology disconnection has affected my life personally. I have 2 aunts, an uncle, and many cousins, like 20, at least 20 of them on both sides of my family, who have not spoken to me since I left Scientology. And when a family member has spoken to me, they have been contacted by the Scientology family members and told that that's not acceptable. My mom hasn't been able to speak to her sister for a decade. My grandfather didn't speak to my dad for a decade before my grandfather finally left Scientology, at which point he was not allowed to speak to his other children. My brother, he's my half brother, so he has, so we share a mom, but he was raised with his dad and his stepmom and his whole life, and he cannot be in contact with them because he's in contact with me. So he has not spoken to them for many, many years. They have not spoken to him. So he doesn't hear from them on Christmas. He doesn't hear from them on his birthday. My friend Nathan, same thing. He left Scientology, and he's in contact with his brother, who has spoken out about Scientology, and he now has his parents disconnected from him. So again, he doesn't hear from them on Christmas. He doesn't hear from them on his birthday. My friend Laura, she hasn't been able to speak to her family for years. She has even walked by her father on Hollywood Boulevard, and he has completely ignored her. She hasn't been able to speak to her sister either. My friend Shane, his brother and his mom and his sister will not speak to him, also his father. And, he has a little boy right now. And so this little boy is most likely never going to meet his grandma or his aunties or his cousins, all because of Scientology's disconnection policy. In order to have yourself be undeclared a suppressive person, or have your suppressive person status revoked, you basically have to admit that everything you said about Scientology was untrue and a lie, and you have to make amends. You have to do hundreds of hours of amends to Scientology. You have to pay back the money that you, for any courses you took, even if you were a staff member for 20 years. So let's just say you're a staff member for 20 years. You took certain courses in Scientology and you didn't have to pay for them because you were a staff member. Well, in order to get back in good standing with Scientology, you now have to pay for all those courses. And courses are thousands of dollars. You also have to receive a Scientology interrogation, which you have to pay for yourself. And it's essentially so they can question you on any bad things you've done. So basically so that they can use it as blackmail against you if you ever speak badly about Scientology again. So essentially, if you say Scientology was right all along, they're perfect and they never do anything wrong, and you tell them all your secrets and you give them even more money than they've already taken from you in your life, then they will give you permission to speak to your children or your parents again. Many of the people who wound up being declared suppressive persons are people who grew up in Scientology. So they've already led a life of having been separated from their parents from a young age. Like me, I never lived in a home with my parents after I was 2 years old for my entire childhood. They're deprived of an education. They have no high school diploma or GED, and they were forced to work long hours, 35 to 60 hours a week before they were 18 years old. And when you think of all that stuff happening, which I consider to be the worst aspect of Scientology, child abuse, and then you think of that, on top of that, when they finally leave Scientology, when they finally get out of this abusive group, they are now told that their parents are never going to speak to them. This is the case for many of my friends. So on top of enduring all of that childhood abuse, they now do not hear from a parent on their birthday, on Christmas, and other holidays where the rest of the world is celebrating. They don't hear from the friends who they grew up with, who were essentially all they had when they weren't around their parents. And it's just terrible. It's child abuse and disconnection are horrible, but when you put them together, they're even more horrible and show even more how evil and destructive Scientology is. And once again, I want to iterate in this video, Scientology is not just a religion with weird beliefs that many celebrities believe in. It is a dangerous, hurtful, and abusive cult that does not take responsibility for its actions, and it does not care about the well-being of the people who have dedicated their entire lives to it. All right, and there we have it, you guys. Disconnection, the second worst thing about Scientology. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments and I will definitely try to get to them in a future video. Don't forget to check out Sins of Scientology on YouTube. And if you haven't already read my book, you can find it on Amazon. It's called Beyond Belief, My Secret Life Inside Scientology and My Harrowing Escape. All right, guys, I hope you have a beautiful day and I'll talk to you soon.